why are we suggesting a multi-LLM? Most of you probably use ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or DeepSeek or various other forms of AI agents. You notice that it has strengths and weaknesses in the way it operates. If you do a multi-agent system, you want to use the best of breed. So you want to understand that this LLM is good at doing this particular task. This LLM is really good at doing this other task. One of my orchestrations I have is a code development orchestration. It uses Claude to do the code. It uses Codex to do the code reviews. And then I use Perplexity and ChatGPT to write the specifications and the enterprise architecture documents to feed into that system. So between those systems, they all work. And one of the nice benefits is because I'm self-orchestrating, I can have a locally hosted LLM when I'm doing really sensitive data. I can run that through and have some very sensitive work totally contained within my own system, and I'm protecting my IP. It doesn't get out into these other systems. And so when you go multi-provider, you get the best of pricing. You can work out where you should spend it, where you should actually focus, what agent is going to give you the best value for your money. DeepSeek is very cheap to use, and it has very good strengths in some aspects. Claude has other aspects, but it's a lot more expensive to use. On average, you've got to work out what your cost sensitivity is, what the agent is going to do. You can use multi-agent to actually optimize your cost. Capability matching, you want to make sure that what you're asking the agent to do matches what the agent can do well. You don't really want to go and get a agent that's been trained on generating videos to actually write code for you. It won't necessarily do a good job. So you've got to make sure you match how your systems are working well. Vendor independence, again, vendors change their prices, they change their EULAs, they change their privacy restrictions. Again, having independence gives you the ability to move away from vendors that are not actually protecting your data properly. And then also with regulation, you can move to the vendors that have the right compliance measures in place. And so when we're doing it, it gives us the ability to isolate ourselves from the changing AI submarket, as it were. And it also enables us to build in a robust way. You can swap the agent out and you can see the results, and you can see whether that agent is better than the previous agent used to have for the same architecture, for the same system. Okay, so let's look at the different tools we have in this system. So the AI landscape changes. This is of December. This slide, every time I rerun my fact checker, this slide changes. New versions are issued, new costs are having, it changes. So be aware of what your model can do. Look at a couple of models, work out what you want to host, what size of model you want to do, look at what the capabilities are. And so when you have that, you match your model to the task. You look at the cost of that model in operation. You work out, can another model do it cheaper? You swap out to that new model. You keep your provider abstracted so that you don't get yourself tied into, we can only use Claude, or we can only use this, or use a particular library. And then you also plan for rapid evolution. AI changes rapidly. The way you develop changes rapidly. The way you prompt changes rapidly. When I'm doing my coding tranches using AI, I find that I have to change my prompts on a weekly basis. I've subscribed to multiple threads on Reddit who discuss how prompts are done. There's a lot of breaking ground. There's a lot of weird ideas that people have about making prompts more effective. Have someone in your organization who is aware of that and is able to move with it. So moving on from the landscape, again, so how do we actually build out the frameworks? What do we have? So what you want to do is, when you look at your organization, where is your skill set? I'm currently helping an organization with an AI implementation. They're largely based in Amazon, and they want to stick with the Amazon tech stack as much as they possibly can. So they're looking at something like Amazon Q. They're looking at various other systems within Amazon to actually help them out. But they also may consider other AI engines and bringing those in. So they may even do hosting of containers to run some of the OpenLlama stuff, or LangChain, sorry, and then they'll have various ways, but they're looking at what they can support, what they can build, and they want to build that experience in-house. Using a vendor to build this stuff out, you're going to lose that knowledge once the vendor leads. So you want to make sure that if you do employ a vendor, you make sure that vendor is going to train your team at the same time in what they're doing so that you can grow with the vendor, and you can grow to help how the system works. You also understand how you're going to deploy this AI into production. What is your plan for that? Are you going to deploy purely side of the desk? Are we going to use this as an information? Or are we using it more as, well, we're going to go formally into production. We're going to have a full CI/CD pipeline. We're going to deploy it with full governance in place. Make those decisions up front. And when you're doing your roadmap, which I'll get to at the end of this deck, have those questions in mind. And then also you're looking at community support, which platforms are supported. If you look at something like Kamuda, or you look at something like N8N for AI workflows, they have different levels of support. They have different costs. N8N is a very new environment. It's quite messy, but it is growing rapidly and it's gaining quite a good following of community out there, people developing frameworks, people supporting it, people posting workflows they've done. So if you're prepared to research, there is a lot of really good features. And then also you're going to match the enterprise features to your organization. If your organization is a large volume data, large number usage system, you want an AI system and orchestration that can suit that well. Okay, it's just a message on the chat. And so we got various things. So in some ways, when we're going for the recommendation I would make on your initial thing, use something like LangChain or Crew AI for doing your work. If you're a Microsoft shop, AutoGen, Semantic Kernel are going to help you out. There's a reasonable framework for that. It will tie into some of your other systems. But LangChain, I've seen some very successful build outs using LangChain and get your feet wet and it can get your toes dipped into the water well. Okay, so then how do we actually build this stuff out? So what is the pattern? So when we look at the industry pattern, you want to separate concerns in your orchestration. So you want your ways, how are you going to get the data displayed to your users? How are your users going to interact with that? So if you look at N8N, there's plugins to chatbots, so you can actually interface with WhatsApp, which I think is going away because WhatsApp changed their API restrictions. But you've got ways into Slack, you've got ways into Teams, you've got ways of actually putting a bot or an agent into your team so you can then call an orchestration workflow from that. And so if you want to do document analysis, you can go to your team site onto the channel saying, please analyze this document, give me a report of it. It uploads through Teams, it's sent to the AI agent, it does its summary, and it returns back with a result, say, this is the summary of the document I had. And because you're using Teams, you have audit capability as well. And because you're in various endpoints, you know who's uploaded what and what sort of responses you get. So you can monitor how the system is working. And then also you need APIs so you can plug into your integration systems. So when you're building an API service layer, you can access the agents using that. So your tools can talk to each other. And then you also want to make sure that whoever contacts your system is authenticated. So how do you make sure you do that? That's all done through the presentation layer. The orchestration layer is really where how the workflows of the agents are coordinated. So it's basically for LangChain, it's a coding library of a set of classes that will go ahead and call up the agents it knows about and say, I got a task. It breaks the task down. It then passes those to the execution layers, and then it starts working on what it actually wants to do. And the execution layer is where the bulk of the work is done. It's where it can read your documents if you have a RAG or you have a knowledge store, vector stores, ontologies, all these other ways of storing information that the AI agents can use. So if you build out a nice 3-tier layer, keep it separate. And then the next question is, when we build or buy. A lot of companies are looking at doing a build out where there's some people are talking about build, some talking about using SaaS platforms. You hear a lot of the sovereignty questions. It's the same questions that happen with the cloud. When that emerged, is what is my sovereignty on my data? Understand your sovereignty needs, but I would recommend when you're testing your AI out, use a SaaS platform, make sure you're using less sensitive data, but something that's effective to your organization, that you can actually get your feet wet. You can test out how it works, and you don't have to worry about building out all this orchestration in the back end in your own systems or your own cloud environment to make this work. So if you use something like N8N, or you use Kamuda, or you use LangChain, or you go for AutoGen, Semantic Kernel, or Amazon Q, and various other systems, you have a way of a controlled environment where you can actually test and build your stuff out. So understand the cost to do that, understand the volume costs, what those break-evens are, understand where you are looking to say, if we pass in 10,000 records, how much is that going to cost us? If we pass in 100,000 records, it's going to cost us even more data. What are we paying for? Make sure you know those different models. So when you choose your SaaS platform, you understand what your cost steps are going to be, when you're going to incur more cost. And then you can actually make the sensible decision of, okay, we have data, we have cost, we can now build a custom platform. This is how much money we should put aside for it, because now you've got a budget aside, worked out a cost saving you can do with that. So start SaaS, then build, but build where the only case where build comes first is when you have very, very sensitive IP that you can't let out and you need to have full control over it, or when you have some value proposition which is so unique or so niche, you don't want that idea to bleed out. Because if you look at something like ChatGPT, there were cases where people believe that ChatGPT is reading their responses and then passing them into the Gestalt. And then people like ChatGPT can actually read those answers and they're actually mining that for data. It goes back to the old days like Google, where Google mined your emails for marketing information. Is it legal? Is it done? There's data. They're going to help. They want to go and extract value from that data. And if you're not paying for the service, you're more likely to have your data extracted. So you could potentially lose ideas by using word clouds. But again, understand what your risks are, understand what you need to do.
So, David, I have a question here.
Yep.
How would you compare, you mentioned frameworks, so how would you compare LangChain with N8N or other frameworks? If you could actually just elaborate a bit, because you seem
Mhm.
to have a bias towards LangChain, so I just wanted to understand.
I use N8N on some cases because I find N8N is very useful for building out these webhooks where you want to have it working in a cloud environment. If you use the commercial community edition of LangChain on N8N, you can give it an IP address, a webhook that it can connect to without you having to set up that cloud infrastructure. If you use LangChain and you want a webhook, it's a little bit different because you're locally hosting the LangChain on your own machines. You have to provide an IP address that the webhook can hit you on. But if it's internal to your system, LangChain makes some things easier, but there's a lot more code involved in LangChain. So LangChain requires code. N8N is basically a drag and drop, no code type environment. So they have their strengths and their weaknesses.
Right. So if you want basically more elaborate workflows, then you would go with LangChain. But
Yeah.
generally, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
And that
LangChain is
would,
more designed around orchestration. N8N is more designed around workflow automation
yeah,
as well.
fair enough. Right. Thank
And
you.
so you watch some of the orchestration designs that people have done in N8N, they're getting better as the nodes get better to do it. So now you can add multiple agents in on a node. You can actually do a little bit better orchestration. But a month ago, in the old days, you used to have to actually do loops within the N8N environment to actually call different orchestrations. So
So we can have the hybrid approach. Like we can have an N8N and then with approach using that with LangChain. That is possible. You've seen that.
You can call in. I mean, you've basically got webhooks that can connect between the two, so you can pass messages through webhooks if you want, or through API calls into those systems. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.